Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 6 of Daffy's Roundtable. Before we go on, let me just apologize for not uploading anything over the past couple of weeks. I was having some technical difficulties with the recording software, but we're back. Okay, and today's guest is another good friend of mine. We actually go fishing and herping together very frequently. But on the reptile side of things, we will be discussing his reptile room today, which is largely concentrated on leopard geckos. We'll also be talking about his experiences in rescuing and rehabilitating, I hope I said that word right, of reptiles. And make sure you stick around to the end because he did grow up in Brazil. So we'll also be talking about his experiences herping in Brazil. Everybody, please welcome Derek Bird of Birdseyeherping. Mr. Derek, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Thank you for coming on.
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a while coming.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We've been planning for this for too long.
A little bit.
All right, I'm gonna get right into it, bro.
Yep.
Tell everybody, what species are you currently keeping at home?
Doing a quick head count. 1 sec. So I have the 7 Leos, which you kind of see the tanks behind me there. I have 2 Gargs, a Leachianus, a Bowers Chameleon Gecko, 2 Cresties, a Knobtail, an African Fat Tail, and then my girlfriend and I actually co-own another Bowers and a ball python. And I actually have a new animal coming in tomorrow. Actually, a former breeder from Reptile Rainforest. It's an anery corn snake.
Very nice.
So that's coming in tomorrow.
And are you also planning to breed this anery corn snake, or?
Maybe we'll see. I've always wanted an anery when it comes to a corn snake, so I'm having it just to kind of have it. Cool. I'm going to be getting some babies from him in the future as well, so maybe get into breeding, but other things kind of busy right now with breeding the Leos. I'm getting into Gargs coming this winter, so other things on the table first.
Nice, I like it. Lots of projects going on. I love it.
Always busy.
Okay, yes, sir. Okay, so before we talk more about your reptile room,
yep.
We said we were going to focus this podcast quite a bit on leopard geckos.
I'm all for it.
So I'm going to start from there.
All right.
By the way, to everybody listening, we're focusing this on leopard geckos because actually, why don't you tell them? Why don't you give them your experience with leopard geckos and just your experience reptile keeping in general?
I started off with leopard geckos. When it comes to actually owning them, you kind of references a little bit in the intro. I grew up in Brazil, so obviously no leopard geckos there. Fell in love with reptiles there, but when I came to Canada, it's the first one I ever owned, and I still have her. She's behind me there. She's turning 11 in about a month.
Very nice.
So I've had her for a little while now. I've had her for just over 10 years. And that's what made me kind of fall in love with the species. There's a lot more to them than people realize. People think it's a leopard gecko. They live in a 10-gallon tank. They don't do anything, and then they're kind of just there. But there's a lot of personality involved. You can do some really elaborate habitats for them. Like my oldest one there, I have a 40-gallon breeder tank for her, all excavator, but it's also all live plants, live succulents, full everything. So you can get really in depth. She has a ton of personality. So like when I walk into the room, she'll kind of just, I say starfishes. So she just sticks herself right against the glass, like with her belly right there, and just stares at me like this, waiting. And she'll just follow you throughout the room. And it's gotten to the point where all of them do that now. So they're all, I walk in, they all come right out. They all love to come out. Each of them has different personality. They're super endearing. And if you're caring for them right, you have a pretty unique pet. People, they get overlooked a lot because they're so common, but there's a lot more to them than people realize.
I 100% agree with that, and I say the same thing about crested geckos. And
exactly.
I once you have them for a while, they really do start to have personality.
They do.
I see the same thing with my cresties. They come out like they starfish as well. They come out right up to the window. Very cool, man. I figured since we were talking about this before we do get into the Leos. So me and Derek work together in a pet store. You want to maybe talk about how you ended up there, and were you keeping leopard geckos before you ended up at the pet store, or how did that go for you?
Yeah, so I got hired at that pet store in 2015. I left just last year, but I got hired there in 2015. Had leopard geckos for about 5 years before that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so well before that. So this pet store, they opened up a branch near where I live, so I applied there, got hired there, and I was there for about 2.5 years, but that was really it's more focused on products. There's not a lot of live animals, a lot of just food, care, tanks, things like that. Eventually got transferred to the larger the larger one of the two, and that came with the actual live reptiles. A lot more in depth. That's kind of what I was aiming for. Ended up running the reptile department there for a little while. You got hired right at the beginning of that, I believe.
That's when I got hired. Yes.
Yeah, it was right when that happened. And no, so I went in there specifically looking for some experience in the reptile field. I at the first location was a lot of dog cat food, a lot of just general product. Got to transfer the bigger one, got to specialize a lot more. I had probably 3 or 4 reptiles when I first got hired in 2015, but then I would transfer to the bigger location, got way more into the exotics. I'd always loved them, but it kind of gave me that reason and that excuse to. So I have.
And then you just get addicted.
I have 20. I think I have 22 right now.
Okay.
If you're counting the 5 fish, I have 22 and 23 tomorrow.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. And growing.
And oh my god, yes, this is nowhere near done. You saw my reptile room not long ago. I'm right in the middle of transitioning everything, getting a new rack. So there's going to be a lot more growth in this year alone.
I'm looking forward to it.
Which I'm excited about.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, back to the leopard geckos then. Give us a brief rundown. Where do they come from? What areas of the world? How are the temperatures over there?
Yeah, so they come from a lot of dry, arid Middle Eastern areas like Afghanistan. They're found pretty commonly. So that's kind of where they like to hang out. They were introduced, I think, 76, so mid to late 70s they were discovered and brought over to North America. And in the mid 80s, they actually had a captive breeding program starting up in the US. And they're actually known as the first domesticated lizard. So.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, they are known as the first ones that were domesticated. Well, as domesticated, I guess, as you can get with a reptile. So I guess a lot of the more common ones have them to thank for actually bringing them into the hobby in the first place. But yeah, when it comes to their setup and things like that, you just mimic where they come from. A lot of people give them heat lamps, which I'm not a huge fan of. You can. They'd be totally fine. But when it comes to heating, something from underneath is much more beneficial for them because they'll actually soak up that heat through their belly,
and
not necessarily through basking.
Sitting on rocks? Or...
Exactly. So just like where they come from, it's dry, it's arid, there's a lot of rocky areas. So instead of basking, they'll actually go out and they'll sit on these places that are a bit more warmer. That's how they absorb their heat. So normally want to mimic that here. It's again, a lot of people use heat bulbs and they can be fine on it, but it's not the most ideal thing. Out in the wild, they'll wait until dusk, dawn, because they're actually, one of the misconceptions about them, they're not nocturnal animals. They have been advertised nocturnal animals since ever, really. A lot of people sell them as nocturnal animals. A lot of people think they're nocturnal.
Since they were introduced.
Yeah, so they are actually what you call crepuscular. So dawn and dusk is when they like to come out. So again, dawn and dusk in the wild, they'll actually wait until the sun's not quite up yet or just down enough that it's not hitting on them. And all these rocks are still really warm. So they'll go and that's how absorb their heat.
Interesting. And for that reason, they don't really require UVB since they're not technically out when the sun is out either.
So that's a bit controversial. I'm a big fan of UVB for them. All of mine have UVB.
Okay.
It's not necessary exactly. A lot of people have been housing them, again, since the 80s. Totally fine. No UVB, no lights of any sort. I think they benefit a lot from it. So my guys, what I'll see is actually they're not out soaking in UVB like you would see a beardy or something like that being out. But you'll see them just have a foot or like tip of their tail or just their nose sticking out of their cave. And that's actually how they're absorbing them. And I've actually noticed a lot of benefits in my guys once I introduced UVB about 5 years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What kind of benefits?
So I actually noticed better diet for the better eating habits.
Better eating responses.
I've done a fair bit of rescues when it comes to Leos, and I always notice such a benefit when it comes to UVB for them. Their appetite kicks up. They're able to digest food a bit better. When you have the UVB and the calcium together, it helps them just grow much better, especially as babies. Again, rescues, a lot of times they'll come in really skinny. Their bones will actually be a little soft, if that makes any sense at all, because normally they have no calcium intake whatsoever. And a lot of times people are feeding crickets high in phosphorus, takes away from the calcium intake of the lizard to begin with. So the UVB combined with calcium will help with baby growth, rescues when it comes to actually back to being healthy and with a stable skeleton. And my guys, again, just it helps them process their food much better.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, and then so the areas they come from, are they more sandy areas, more rocky areas? Because I always hear this debate when it comes to leopard geckos is you shouldn't put them on sand, you should keep them on like repti carpet or excavator clay. Why is it that they can handle sand in the wild if they do and not in captivity? I know this is a very controversial topic, but do you have an opinion on it?
Yeah. So in the world, it's primarily rocky. A lot of rocky area. There is some sand, so they can survive on sand in captivity. Again, I tend to avoid it. Impaction is a huge problem with them, where they eat too much sand while they're striking crickets or butterworms, whatever they're eating that day, and it'll slowly build up in their stomach because they can't digest it.
Interesting.
Now, some people say you can do it, and you technically can if you want to have it on sand because they will burrow a little bit. So if you want to tong feed or make sure they're eating out of a dish specifically so that there's no risk of them intaking that sand, I avoid it. I find it a bit too much of a hassle, and it's a concern that doesn't need to be there, in my opinion. You don't have to worry about that if you can avoid it. So I use reptic carpet when they're breeding. Sometimes I use reptic carpet. For the most part, they're on excavator because it still lets them, it still lets them get into their burrows, things like that, which they like to do. But I'm not worried about any kind of impaction.
Awesome. So they can burrow in excavator clay then?
Well, I'll make artificial burrows for them. So
Okay,
what
so
I'll do is, I'll make that artificial burrow, and I won't fill it with sand. Again, it's too much of a worry for me. They can do a lot of anything as simple as cocoa soil. Honestly, it's more digestible than sand. So if something happens, which is doubtful, then they'll be able to pass it. But yeah, I'll use that. Or Arcadia actually has an arid specific soil, which I love, and that they will burrow into.
Awesome.
And again,
Very
not
cool.
a risk of impaction there.
So the Arcadia soil or something a little more digestible then is better
Yeah,
for
because
them to grow.
sand, what happens when you pour water on sand? It clumps, right? Same thing in the digestive tract. Something like the soil they'll pass through. If something
Okay,
tends
that
to
makes
happen,
sense.
and again, I use it exclusively in a burrow that they'll be hanging out in, and it's not super deep. I know they're not eating in there. I'm not too worried about it.
Okay, very cool. How about breeding? Do you keep your males and your females together? Do you separate them and then just introduce them for pairing? And what temperature do you incubate eggs at? What do you use as a lay box?
Yeah. So I don't tend to keep them together if they're not breeding. Cohabitation in general can have its own risk, not just Leos. That's almost any reptile.
Okay,
Cohabiting, you can have problems unless you have something like mourning geckos or longtails or something. They're fine together, but a lot of the gecko species you just can't.
agreed.
People say you can do it with stuff like crusties, and technically you can, but again, I don't see the reason behind it. So I'll pair them when they're going to be breeding, and even then, I like to do a bit of a slow introduction. So if there's a pair that haven't met each other yet, I'll actually put the male in with the female, but I'll leave them in like a clear container
Okay,
so that there is a barrier between them, but they can kind of get used to each other, and I can kind of see how that goes. So far, I haven't had any issues, but I do it just in case. When it comes to incubation, it depends what gender you're going for. So anywhere from 89 degrees is the standard. Lower temperatures around 80, 83, around there, you're going to get a lot of females primarily. You get in the mid 80s, 85 to 87, you're going to get a healthy combination of the two. Higher into the 80s, into like when you hit 90, you're going to get mostly boys.
okay. So they are temperature. The sex is dependent on the sex on the temperature you incubate them at.
Absolutely, which actually makes it really convenient for breeding.
Of course,
Yeah,
that's
so
very cool.
super helpful.
I've tried to test it out with crested geckos, but haven't found any correlation yet.
Not the same.
I mean, not to my knowledge. I might not be going cold enough or hot enough for that.
Yeah. When it comes to what I'm using, Reptihatch by Rapashi
Okay.
is what I use. You can use stuff like vermiculite, but it doesn't deal as well, I think, with higher humidity because you want them to be around that 85 to 95 humidity range, which might throw people off because they are an arid, dry animal. But incubation, you want it quite humid.
Is that because they burrow their eggs so it's more humid underground?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, very interesting.
And so the Reptihatch, if you let it soak, it tells you exactly how humid it is. So it gets a bit darker or lighter depending on how wet it is. So you can actually, just by looking into the incubator, you can see how humid your incubation media is. So
Awesome.
that way, I don't like to touch or go near the eggs if I don't have to.
Right. Of course.
So that way, yeah, I can just look at it, and if it's dry, I'll be able to see it right away. So I don't have to go in there, open it up, feel around, mess with anything if I don't have to.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I just started using the Repti hatch that you gave me actually, and
Yeah.
I'm already liking it a lot more.
Oh, it's an awesome product, and you buy like a 5 pound thing of it, and you have it for so long.
Right, and it's reusable. So
Yeah, exactly.
might as
So
well.
I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, shout out Rapashi.
Oh, they're phenomenal, phenomenal.
Yeah. Awesome. So besides them being the first domesticated lizard in captivity, what do you think makes leopard geckos very popular as a first pet?
A lot of the time, it's a kid wanting a reptile, right? And for leopard gecko, especially when they're babies, you see like the big bulging eyes that are adorable, and
100%.
they're relatively handleable. All the ones I have, I'll hang out if I'm watching TV or gaming or whatever. If I'm just hanging out after work, I'll have one on my shoulder and they just hang out.
Awesome.
So they become quite handleable. They're easy to take care of. Very minimal setup. Anything like a 20 long is a standard minimum for an adult. I would never go anything smaller. If you have a baby, it can go into a 10-gallon for a while. So they don't take up a ton of space. You can be like me and get a 40 breeder for yours, because why not? I like to overkill things. She's happy, I'm happy. But they don't take up a lot of space. They're handleable. They're very easy to maintain. People don't realize they do live for a very long time. They go about 20, 25 years. Yeah, 20, 25 years. So they can go for a while. Like I got my first one. I was 13. I've now graduated high school, college, and she's barely middle aged. Like that's
It's just okay.
Still
gonna be around for a while. Right.
Absolutely, and I'm happy she is. I love her to death. But they do live for quite a while. People don't tend to realize that. That's why you see a lot of them rehoming. If you're going through like Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace, you'll see them everywhere because people don't realize how long they live. When it comes to being popular, easy to maintain, they are super adorable, very handleable, very personable. Again, once you have them for a while, you really start to see individual personalities. So I think that's why they've stuck for so long.
Very cool. And actually, the whole Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace is something that I do want to touch up on, but we'll get to that after a few more questions. So you mentioned you want to talk about the Enigma Syndrome for leopard geckos. So what is it? How does it affect them? And how common is it? And what causes it?
Yeah, so it's the Enigma Syndrome because it's primarily found in the Enigma morph. Right. Which is, and when it comes to genes, it's actually a dominant gene. So if you breed out an Enigma, you're going to have an Enigma. And
1 second, I'm going to look up here. Is there a specific morph that contains this syndrome?
Yeah, it's called the Enigma. That is the morph name.
So that is the morph name. Okay.
Yeah, that's why it's named the Enigma, because it's named after that specific morph. And they are quite nice looking. So people fall for it. They see the nice coloration, and those eyes are captivating. But they can cause quite the problem.
Oh, okay. So which one are we talking about here? I'm gonna share my screen real quick.
Sure.
All right, which one?
Okay. So these are all Enigma something. So Enigma is used in a lot of other genes.
Oh, okay.
Something like a pure Enigma. See that the top row, third in from the left. That's a fairly standard Enigma, I'd say.
Okay, so it's not visually visible on them.
Not always, but if you close that image, for example, on the left there, that has the Enigma gene. No, not that guy there.
Okay.
You can call that one a high orange, I think.
Yeah.
But top left.
Orange.
Yes.
So
the very first photo, that one has the Enigma gene in it, and so you can see what Enigma does when it's together with another gene. So that one looks like it might be Enigma tangerine, something like that.
And what it does is
it makes them gorgeous. See that it's that distinct pattern. So on the leopard gecko on the right, you have those 4 kind of bubbles that come in from the sides of the gecko.
Right.
And it's orange in the center. It kind of goes back to a pale.
Okay.
Yeah, if you close that one, I saw another good example of that exact thing.
Sure.
Second row furthest on the right.
This one here.
So that one's a high yellow Enigma. Same kind of deal. It puts that pale in with that darker color, so there's a lot of contrast.
Very cool.
So they are very, very nice looking. They have those red eyes, kind of like an albino, but a little bit deeper. So they can make things look really, really nice, but there's a lot of neurological problems when it comes to them. But they're bred out because they can make things look so beautiful, and people can charge a fortune for them.
Okay,
So
but the effect of having the Enigma is
So it could be. I relate it a lot to the spider gene in ball pythons because the spider gene is a bit more commonly known throughout general reptile world.
so it's
Where,
a neurological
yeah,
disorder.
it's a neurological problem, and some of the effects can actually be similar to the spider gene. So stargazing, wobbling, things like that. Those are the minor effects when it comes to the Enigma gene. It could be anything like that. They'll see them just walking in circles in their tank. Yeah, and they are extremely susceptible to high stress. So anything like even transporting them could actually kill them because they're prone to, on the extreme end of things, random seizures.
Wow.
It's nicknamed the death roll, and it can kill them. It's, again, people breed it out because they can make things look really nice, but it's such a risk.
And those seizures and all the other problems, they occur naturally, or is it's naturally but randomly, or is it a specific age that it starts happening, or how does it work?
It can be literally out of nowhere. As far as I'm aware, don't take me as an absolute expert on the thing. I've done a fair bit of research into it because I've been into leopard geckos for about just over a decade now. I've talked to a lot of breeders. It can be random. Again, high stress can make it worse, but they get stressed super easy. So even transportation, too many crickets in with the gecko at one feeding, anything like that can cause stress, or it's out of nowhere. And I've fallen victim to it myself. I've had an Enigma jungle baby before. The jungle is my favorite gene to have in a leopard gecko. It causes phenomenal patterns. They're beautiful.
Okay,
but I had
going back to Google then. Hold on. Jungle?
Yeah, jungle. So it's just unique patterns. They're random, which I love. So if you have a jungle combined with something else, they can look, again, very unique. So you don't see two that really look the same.
Okay, very cool.
Which is why I like them. But I followed it for myself. I had a baby. He was maybe 5-6 months old, and again, he just passed away.
He had the Enigma.
Yeah, so
the
I didn't.
Enigma.
Yeah, so at
Enigma
first
syndrome,
I actually didn't know that. When I first got him, I didn't know that he had Enigma. Found out he did. Got a little concerned, but I already had him. I'm not going to let him go.
Right.
So I did what I could to prevent any kind of stress level. But again, it's just it happens.
Okay.
And it's very sad, and people breed it out because, again, they can make things look really nice without really realizing the neurological effect it has on all of these animals.
Very cool.
So I've got a bit of a problem. People brought the Enigma gene. It's not responsible, in my opinion.
Of course not. Why would you breed something that, I mean, you're breeding an animal and sending it to its death 100%?
Yeah, I picture it as a breeder who's looking out. There's a lot of very good breeders out there, but there are some who are just in it for the money, like with any animal. And I just picture somebody out breeding out an Enigma, even like the Enigma jungle that I had. Gorgeous. Giving it to some 9-year-old kid looking for his first reptile, him going in 2 months later and just finding it passed away, thinking he did something wrong. Like, majority of the time you did nothing wrong. It's the gene. It's how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of that one.
No, 100%. No, that makes sense. All right, let me ask you about the lemon frost then, because I read an article a few months ago about it. That all the geckos that have a lemon frost gene are getting tumors, and apparently these tumors are helping in research with cancer in humans. Do you know anything about this?
So I'm really back and forth on it because I see, looking at it a purely logical way, I can see the benefits of having it in the scientific community when it comes to research, but when it comes to especially breeding for the general public, I don't support it at all. Again, they are extremely prone to both internal and external tumors. They are striking. I don't know if you've seen a photo of them. They're like a high yellow with a black tail. They're absolutely gorgeous. But their average lifespan is 2 to 3 years.
Wow. Okay.
That's just enough time for it to reach maturity, essentially.
Just enough time for them to breed them before they. Yeah.
That's basically what it is. And because of that, people will charge. You can't breed a ton of them because you don't have it for very long. So people will charge several $100s a baby.
Okay.
Again, I can see the benefits when it comes to the scientific community and research. I don't fully support it, but I can see the benefits of it.
Right.
When it comes to breeding for general public or the hobby in general, I don't find it.
Don't see it.
I don't see the purpose in it.
Of course
You
not.
you can get a high yellow with 1,000 other, like a ton of other genes. The black tail is a bit more unique, but black knights, that morph has come a long way. It's a bit newer when it comes to being well known, but now they're trying to breed it out with other genes, and you can start getting that specific black, that black coloration where you want it. So something like a black tail is becoming much more realistic the last couple of years. I see no reason why anyone, even if you wanted that yellow body, black tail, you don't need a lemon frost. I don't see the reasons behind it.
Eventually, someone will. Yeah, no, 100%. Eventually, someone
Yeah.
will breed that, and hey, it could be you.
Maybe one day.
Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully.
What about other morphs? Is there any other morphs with similar problems like the lemon frost and the Enigma?
The white and yellow has a relative. It's similar to the Enigma, but not to the extent. They can do the wobble. They have stargaze sometimes. They're not prone to the seizures as much, which is good. But one of the issues is that white and yellow is again a dominant gene, so people breed them like mad because they are gorgeous, and so the inbreeding doesn't help when it comes to that. So they're a neurological problem. You can get one and you can have with no problems for 20 years. You can live a perfectly happy life, no problems at all.
White and yellow.
Yeah, white and yellow. I myself have dealt with quite a few of them, and I haven't seen a. Yeah, white and yellows, okay. And not here. I haven't bred them. I've never owned one, but I've dealt with quite a few, and you can have one with no problems whatsoever. But if you have one with, say, stargazing, they're prone to, again, walking in circles.
Which one's a true white and yellow?
Top left is a pretty good example.
This one right here.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a very good looking animal, for sure. But again, they do technically have that neurological issue similar to the Enigma, but not to the extent. Worst you can get with one of these guys is stargazing, wobbling, sometimes the walking in circles. But when it comes to that, it's really dependent on where you get it. I'm not going to say avoid them, because if you go to a responsible breeder, you're probably going to be okay. A lot of it comes from inbreeding because they are beautiful. People can sell them for a lot of money, so they just breed like there's no tomorrow, and that's where the problem's going to start to come out.
Agreed.
Yeah. So you find a responsible breeder, you can get one of these guys, and you can have it for 2 decades, no problem.
Very cool.
Other thing, the blade. Any kind of blizzard, like a blazing blizzard, sometimes can have some problems, like a skin problem, because they have very little pigmentation.
And the blizzards are the full white with the black spots on them?
So it's a super snow. A blazing blizzard essentially looks pink until it gets a bit older. Again, that one, just be careful when it comes to heat bulbs, because their skin is a bit more sensitive, especially when they're babies.
Those are the ones that look like aliens, right?
They do weirdly look like an alien. Yeah, you're not wrong. So just be careful with high temperatures, because they're susceptible to being burnt when they're babies. Okay. The super snow really comes down to the inbreeding. That's a huge. They, I think, probably worse than any other gene or morph are damaged by inbreeding a lot, because they're extremely striking. If you have a row of leopard geckos and you have one super snow, you'll see it right away. So pure white black spots.
So in leopard geckos, you're really starting to see the effects of inbreeding already. I guess you guys are like 10, maybe even like 20, 30 years ahead of crested gecko breeders. So
absolutely.
We're probably looking at the future in leopard geckos.
Absolutely. Well, leopard geckos have been more known.
Much longer, yeah.
Yeah, they've been bred. I think they were probably starting to be bred back when cresties were still thought to be extinct.
They definitely were, yeah.
Exactly.
Cresties
so,
1994, I believe.
Yeah, so they have years on cresties. Cresties will get there, I'm sure. But like with how popular they are, they'll be there in no time. But stuff like a super snow, again, because you can see it right away. You can have 30 leopard geckos in a row, and you have one super snow. It's the first thing people are going to see. There's no yellow. There's no traditional leopard gecko colors. It's pure white, black spots. It just
stands out, yeah.
Yeah, and you see it immediately, and they're gorgeous. As someone who owns 2 Dalmatians, I'm a big fan of white with black spots. Big
Yeah,
fan of
yeah,
that.
true.
Even my fat tail you've met white with black. I like the color combination a lot.
It's a
Uh,
nice one, but not at the cost of the gecko's health.
yeah, and again, this goes back to what I said of white and yellows. You find a responsible breeder who keeps genes apart, no inbreeding whatsoever, kind of thing, and you can have one with no problems whatsoever. But if you go to anywhere, anything big,
Any random breeder on Kijiji.
like a random Kijiji breeder kind of thing, they've bred so many, and actually one of the biggest problems is that to get that super snow, like that perfect super snow look, a lot of people breed them with enigmas to get that pale coloration. And so again, the enigma is a dominant gene that's going to pass over to the babies.
Okay.
So the super snows can have occasionally a neurological problem, but it's the inbreeding that's a huge problem with them. You can have facial deformities. You'll see weird look at like kinked spines a lot of the time. They won't eat. You'll see that they just have no drive to eat whatsoever. So they're usually very anorexic.
Okay.
Signs of breeders to avoid, basically. Again, you go to a good breeder, you can have one with no problems. They'll probably let you meet the parents. They'll tell you about the lineage if they've been doing it for a while, and you can have with no issues whatsoever. Same thing goes with giants. Giants are starting to become really popular now
Okay.
because who doesn't want a beardy-sized leopard gecko? I do. I really do. I'm
They're
probably gonna
that
get one.
big.
Maybe not quite that big, but they're very large. They're much bigger than your traditional leopard gecko. They're about twice the size.
Wow.
I'm going to be having one at some point. I'm sure I will. There's something so unique. It's probably 4 years now they've started to get a bit more popular. But again, watch out for what breeders are going to. A lot of them overfeed their giants to make them look bigger and bigger because they can sell them for more money. But then you're buying an obese leopard gecko that can have a heart problem.
Do we have any breeders in Canada? I haven't even heard of this.
There's a
Giant
couple.
breed.
There's not many. It's predominantly the states. If you want to get one, like I'm probably gonna have to drive down to the states to get one.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, but again, just common sense. If you go to a breeder and that giant looks like a peach, don't get him. Like, just
You
watch
can
out
roll
for
him
obesity.
over.
Yeah, like if you can roll him over and you can't get back like a turtle, it's a problem.
Yeah.
So avoid that. For the most part, they're going to be fine, but just keep an eye out for obesity because people, again, the bigger they are, the more they can sell them for because it's a giant.
So this topic is actually a great segue
Mhm.
to the whole rescue and rehabilitation topic. So
Yeah.
what species besides leopard geckos have you rescued in the past?
So again, a fair bit of leopard geckos, primarily what I was focused on for with rescuing specifically. I brought in a rescue knobtail who actually I still have. I ended up keeping him. I couldn't let him go. He's so mean. He's super mean, and he yells all the time. But I love him to death. Like he's great.
Okay,
I
that's
couldn't
awesome.
I couldn't let go of him. I really couldn't. After bringing him back, I had to keep him. Actually, my fat tail Humet, same deal. Very skinny, didn't eat at all. Was starting to have showing signs of NBD because she wouldn't eat anything and so you can take any calcium.
Okay, can you talk on MBD a little bit? So it stands for metabolic bone disease, right?
Yeah, it does.
And how common is it in leopard geckos or fat tails or the knobtails, like in geckos in general?
So it's not so it doesn't come in through breeding, right? It's entirely to do with their care
And their diets.
and their diet. That's why I love having the UVB for my leopard geckos, and also you mentioned fat tails. My every fat tail I ever had, all UVB. My knobtail also has UVB. Anything that's not nocturnal, so crepuscular or diurnal, they have UVB. That's the way I see it, and it helps them process that calcium that they take even better, which helps prevent stuff like MBD.
Right.
So when it comes to feeders, crickets are super big. Super worms or giant mealworms, whatever you want to call them. They're used a lot, but their shells are really high in phosphorus, which actually takes away from the amount of calcium that they're getting from that animal.
Interesting.
So they have about I think it's a 2-to-1 ratio of phosphorus to calcium. So every time your gecko is eating a cricket or a superworm or a mealworm, mealworms is a separate problem we can talk about. I'm not a fan of them at all. Superworms are more acceptable to me. But again, they're high in phosphorus. Every time you're feeding one without that calcium coating, they're losing calcium.
It's mealworms that you're not okay with?
Yeah. So they have a lot of chitin. That's what
Okay.
their shell is made out of. Superworms have it too, but it's much more of a different ratio because superworms are so small. Chitin, enough of it
Mealworms
can
are so
act.
small.
Yeah, mealworms are tiny, right?
Right.
And so half of what the gecko's eating is shell, not meat. or
Okay, that makes sense.
whatever you want to call bug meat. Protein. We'll say protein.
Protein, yeah.
I don't know what bug meat's called. And so enough chitin, it can impact the stomach like sand can. So I give everything here and there. Mealworms I'll give like once a month. I'll give something. So they're small, they move around, it gives my gecko something to chase.
Okay.
But for the most part, superworms, crickets, big one, high in phosphorus, low in calcium. That's why they always say calcium dust your crickets. So you don't lose that calcium level. You don't gain calcium. A lot of people think that your gecko is gaining calcium. They're not. You're actually just you're preventing loss. You're cutting even.
You're balancing it out.
Basically, that's why
So
super
how do you-
loading.
No, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. That's why super loading is so important. So super loading, Rapashi again has an awesome one. I have 2 bottles of it beside me here.
If
And
you
you
have
give
it right
it.
inside you, hold it up.
No,
No, okay. If it's that far, never mind.
it's right here. We're
Okay,
good.
cool. Yeah.
That guy right there.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. So that's super load. You can give it either as a powder, or if you want to make it into a gel, you can just add boiling water, let it dry. Give it most of them the day before you feed. Give it to your the cricket or the superworm. They'll eat it, and then you dust it. So again, you have that dusting to prevent loss. So now you're cutting even. So you're not losing anything, but you're not gaining anything. Once you have the super load, it literally overloads the insect with calcium, vitamins, minerals, everything that they need. That's why you have to give it the day before, because if you wait too long, the insect will actually die because you overload their system.
So that's how they gain. That's how the gecko gains the calcium.
Yeah, so they go from losing, then you add calcium dusting. Now you're cutting even, but you're not gaining. Now you're gaining.
Now you're getting because of the super load.
And again, that UVB helps them process all of that much better. So it helps prevent stuff like, again, MBD. Going back to what we're talking about. So it's MBD is very easy to prevent. Just have UVB, whether it's 10.0, 5.0. I use 10.0. Zoomed, Reptisun is what I use for my guys. Again, that UVB will help them cycle that calcium through their body. Make sure that you're not doing anything to make them lose calcium. So adding calcium, gut loading is beneficial. And
How
it's
long
actually
do you leave the UVB on for?
I leave it on about 8 hours a day.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't go overboard. Again, crepuscular, so they come out down in dusk. So I don't tend to like to have it on while they're wanting to roam.
Okay.
Because
And
they
do you
won't.
do it 4 hours, or do you do it 8 hours in one go?
It depends on the season, actually. In the summer, when it's hotter, I just do 8 hours straight.
Okay.
In the winter, they're more picky with when they come out, at least where we are, right? We're in Ontario, so nice and cold. My guys don't like to come out a whole ton during the winter.
For sure.
So I do kind of 4 hours on, 4 hours off, and I do that in a different way. So 8 hours during the day in the summer. So again, I said that I don't like to have it on when they're out and about roaming. So again, I'll have that foot or their nose or something will be out, and that's how I'm absorbing it. In the winter, I switch it to about 4 hours more when they're out, like sequencing with their dawn and dusk habits. So I make sure they're getting it. Yeah, that's what I do.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. That's a good way to think about it, because that's when they're getting it in the wild too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So in the winter, especially, I want to have that assurance that they're getting it. Yeah,
Very
but
cool.
MBD is super easy to avoid. Just a little bit of maintenance and you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then once you have a reptile that comes in with MPT, how hard is it to bring them back to good enough to be a pet again, or good enough to
Yeah,
healthy
that's
enough? Yeah.
that's where it gets it can get a bit more complicated. Depends on the situation. I've had one before that I couldn't bring back. I've had one and it passed away, unfortunately, under my care. It was to the point where he couldn't use his front legs at all. Like they were just like sticks. They dragged along behind him.
Wow.
But when it comes to recovering from it, so most calcium supplements you see have D3 added into it because D3 is very good for them. That D3 is what helps them when it comes to UVB. The UVB and the D3 work together to help process that calcium.
100%.
So what I do, you can't give too much D. You can overload, or I guess overdose on D3. You can give them too much vitamin D, and it can be bad for them. Calcium, you cannot physically give too much. So anything excess, they'll pee away.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so I'll get a
talking
calcium.
about like the Repashy calcium low D, for example.
The no D, no D. It's just it's pure calcium. There's nothing else into it, and I just feed. I don't feed it to them, obviously, but I leave a little bowl of it out. They'll lick it up as they sometimes they'll go lick it up. I put it on everything. If I give them grub pie rapashi, which I like to try and get my guys onto. Or if I syringe feed the rapashi and I leave it as like more of a paste and don't do the traditional gel, I put a fair bit of it into it because anything that they're taking in, anything excess is not going to damage them. It'll go away. So that way I know they're getting as much calcium in them safely as possible.
Very cool.
So I'll add it into the rapashi. I put on everything. I leave a little bowl of it out. You can actually get a liquid calcium. Until recently, Zilla made a pretty good one. I can't seem to find it anymore. I don't know if it's not available in Canada. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I know Canada has new restrictions with that. Like that's why we can't get the meat pie by Rapashi anymore because they switched from squid to chicken.
Yeah,
Canada's.
So you can still get the grub pie though, right?
You can still get the grub pie, yeah. But I'm trying to find a new one. You can get like a liquid calcium additive to put it into their water.
Okay.
So basically, if someone comes with the MBD on top of regular, like you have to make sure they get to D3 so they can process everything properly. Make sure they have UVB, but add any excess calcium that you can. So whether it's in their water, their food, in Rapashi, if you're getting Rapashi.
How long does it take usually? I know it can differ with every animal, but roughly how long?
Yeah, it really depends. Longest I had one for 8 months. Yeah, it took 8 months to get them back to like standard pet care. Sometimes they're never going to be perfect again, but they'll be okay. They'll be able to live a healthy life.
Okay,
but it's not 100% every time, depending how bad the situation is.
Definitely, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And would you say MBD and that kind of like, would you say MBD is your biggest challenge, or is there something else that the rescue animals could come in with that's worse than MBD?
MBD is definitely up there. Abscesses can be quite the problem. I find a lot of animals who are in sand, things like that, can actually get abscesses along their mouth. So what happens if they ever get a little cut or they eat a cricket and the cricket bites like the tip of their lip right there, sand gets in and can cause an infection. And cause, again, it's not only sand, that's an example. It can be caused by a variety of reasons. But abscesses along the mouth, I've seen quite a few times. They can be a little, I don't remove them myself. I've done it before. I really don't like doing it. It's a little risky, at least for me. I'm not trained. So I've done it depending how big it is. So an abscess is made of pus, right? And pus in a reptile is not a liquid, it's a solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, a ton of fun. It's just great.
It's a solid.
Yeah, so it's like a rock in their mouth.
Okay. Great.
So it can if it gets big enough, it can really get in the way of them even eating or drinking water. Not necessarily cut it. So they actually it's like a dental tool, like that dental hook, because there's going to be an opening in the mouth from what started it. So they stick the dental tool in there and they just pop it out, and eventually there'll be like a little bit of a sac there. It'll get absorbed. Eventually, it'll go back to normal. So abscesses, I've had some problems with, but it's pretty fixable. MBD is probably the worst. Okay. Anorexia is one.
They probably come in very skinny all the time, huh?
Yeah, they can, for sure. And problem with an anorexic leopard gecko, sometimes it's done that they don't want to eat after that. It's really difficult to get them back on food. Yeah, whether you're force feeding, which you might have to do for a while, which I avoid because it's so stressful for the animal, and for me, it's not fun.
No, I bet, yeah.
But anorexia, MBD, and probably abscesses are probably top 3 for me.
Yeah. Top 3 worst.
Top 3 worst things to deal with. Okay. I don't want to make it sound positive. It's terrible, but
no, 100%.
Yeah.
And then, is it tough to find homes for the animals once they are back to like standard pet care, or like once people find out that this animal was a rescue or whatever, or are people generally happy to adopt?
So I'm really lucky in the way that I still have a great relationship with a pet store that we used to work at. And I know a couple different rescues, so I always have somewhere to go to. Once the animal's good to go, I can go like dot it out through a rescue, or if it's in perfect pet care, I'll give it off to the pet store we used to work at, and they'll sell it for nice and cheap, just so I can find a new home. So I'm really fortunate that I have options when it comes to adopting out the animal.
Definitely. And have you ever kept any of them besides the knobtail? The African fat tail?
Yeah, my fat tail I kept, the knobtail I kept. I've never kept a Leo. If I kept all the ones that I ended up loving, I would have like 30 leopard geckos.
Nothing wrong with that.
My hydro build begs to differ.
Yeah.
It's a lot to manage. There's one that came really close. I had a really hard time letting that one go. It's the one I had for 8 months. The long one there.
Okay.
I had a tough time letting that one go. But when it comes to leopard geckos, I have never kept one. Surprisingly enough, not yet.
Impressive,
I'm
impressive.
sure eventually I'll end up keeping one.
Someday it'll happen.
Yeah, probably.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Okay, so we're getting round about to the 45-minute mark, which is usually where I like to stop.
Okay.
But I can't let you go without asking about your experiences herping in Brazil. So can you very briefly tell us how old were you and how long, or like how old were you when you were living there and whereabouts in Brazil you were living?
So I lived in Brazil twice. First time I was 4 to 7 years old. That's where I first kind of got into reptiles.
Okay.
It was actually really weird. I was terrified of them when I was a little kid, like 4 or 5. I was so scared of them. So I started to research them to figure out how to avoid them. I didn't want to go anywhere near them in the wild.
So your love for reptiles started by learning about them to avoid them.
Yeah, and then I started to learn about them, how to go find them, because I ended up loving them.
Okay.
And when I was 7, I left. I moved to China for 4 years. Well, I did some herping in China, but it's not as eventful as Brazil.
Right.
I moved back when I was 11 until I was about 13, 14.
Okay.
And that's where I got really into the going out and herping in the wild for them.
When you were, so you were 11 to 14, you were living there.
The second time.
The second time. Okay.
The second time, yeah. There, and at that point, I was in Sao Paulo. Brazil. Yeah, the first time I was there, I was in Brasilia. Probably a better place for herping, a much smaller city. Sao Paulo has more access to places, though. So herping there is a lot of fun. You don't do it in the city. There's nothing in the city to find. It's polluted. There's so many people. But take like a 45-minute drive, and you can. It's amazing what you'll find.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I do want to ask you what kind of species you found. But before we get into that,
yep.
Did you ever see any dart frogs?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Okay.
They're not super common. It depends where you are. The closer the city you are, it's polluted. They don't want to be there. Being amphibians, it can damage their skin.
Of course.
It depends where you go. There's a Para. Para is the name of a province. It's the Para province there, and there is dart frog galore. It's you see Azuris fairly commonly. The Azuris are pretty easy to find.
I was just about to ask you if you remember what species you saw. Okay.
Yeah, so not all of them. I was younger, right? But Azuris, they're easy to find. Bright blue, like you're gonna see it. There's one called there's one called the Brazilian nut dart frog that you could find. I've never seen it here. Never seen it for sale. Never seen it captive bred. But down there, they're awesome. It's like a black with dark brown patterning.
Okay.
There I saw cobalts with the bright red yellow heads.
Wow.
I'm trying to think what else I saw. I don't remember all of them. I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't.
Like Oyopak, Santa Isabel's.
There's a good chance I saw Oyopox when I thought they were cobalts for a second. I wasn't as into dart frogs back then. I was really more focused on the lizards and the snakes, so that's what I was aiming towards.
Okay.
I've gotten into dart frogs a lot more as I got a little older, but for the most part, I was aiming for reptiles, not so much amphibians.
Okay, in that case, tell me what species of reptiles did you find? And I don't know. Oh. Go ahead. Yeah, tell me what species you found.
So many. A lot of different anole species. When it comes to snakes, they have a couple different rat snakes. Snakes specifically was really iffy when he found one because you had to really look at it before you tried to pick it up, make sure you know what it is.
A lot of species in the area, yes?
There's a fair bit. Yeah. Rule of thumb with any reptile down there, if you ever go down there, if you don't know what it is, don't touch it. Like, don't even try. Don't think that like it doesn't have this patterning, it doesn't have that thick head, so it's not going to be venomous. Don't risk it. They have southern corals down there that it looks like a milk snake. Like unless you know what it is, don't touch it.
Okay.
That being said, I've handled a fair bit of venomous species. I had again that privilege. One of my best friends, his dad was a herpetologist, so I would go out with him, and he'd let us hold. He was a bit picky, but again, I was a little younger, right? So I went out with him. Eventually, he showed us all the good spots. Started going out on my own with my friends.
I mean, he's not gonna throw a Bushmaster in your hands, but
I'm getting to the Bushmaster. That's my next thing.
Yeah.
I found one. I hated it. I hated every moment of it. I think we've talked about this before in person. I love going into caves. Caving is a lot of fun, especially down there. They're massive. They're intricate. Super cool. Don't go in if you don't know what you're doing because you'll never leave. A lot of bats. A lot of bats. And the thing is, a lot of reptiles didn't like to go into the caves. You can find some snakes, things like that, but a lot of the ones that you have to worry about, the rule of thumb, like the Bushmaster, you didn't find in the caves a whole lot.
Okay.
And the Bushmaster was probably the one I was most scared of. More than any other snake. Now that I look
For a
back
good
at it,
reason.
yeah. Now that I look back at it, maybe the fer-de-lance should have been like my main concern because that's bites way more people and is just as potent.
Okay.
But the Bushmaster always scared me when I was a kid. When I was there,
What's the other species?
the fer-de-lance.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not big. They get like 3 feet, maybe 4, but like that's really stretching it.
Okay. So
And they
tiny.
bite more people than any other snake in South America. Like they're extremely potent venom.
That's
It's quite
probably
the
because
problem.
they're more common in areas where there are people than any other snake.
You can find them in like parks,
Yeah.
but a big part of it is because they're so small. You don't see them. People step right near them all the time without realizing, and out of fear, they just strike. Right.
100%.
But Bushmasters at the time was like they're a giant venomous snake. I don't want to mess with that. So we went over one of these caves, and in my head, like we're in a cave, we're not going to see a Bushmaster. Like that was always what was in my head. Like avoid the Bushmaster. I would handle any other reptile that I found. It doesn't matter how big. I have been bit by a fair few lizards and snakes. A lot of the bigger lizards, tegus. I got napped by a tegu once.
A lot of tegus walking around there. Yeah.
Depending where you are, yeah. Again, something like Sao Paulo, they don't go there, but a lot of the smaller cities, yeah, they're going to be around. A lot of people think Tegu, Argentina, but they're everywhere down there.
Okay.
I got nipped by a Tegu. The Bushmaster always scared me the most. No matter what, I was never going to handle one. I wasn't even gonna, even if a professional handed it to me holding the head. No, there's not a chance.
Okay.
And then I found one. I only ever found one, and it was in the cave where I thought it wouldn't be. I was so positive. We got in the cave. It's not going to be in there. We're good. And then they rattle, right? It's not a rattlesnake, but it's like they have like that whipping sound. Like, have you ever heard of the angry corn snake? It's like that.
I've heard the sound of the. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like that. Like the. It's hard to say. It's like a whip.
Okay.
And that's what they do when they're upset. And we were in there, and we started hearing this weird noise, and we're like, "What's that?" And it's weird because you're in a cave, so it was echoing, right? It was loud. And then we had the flashlights out, so we're looking around, and maybe 5-6 feet away from me, there was a Bushmaster all coiled up. And I'm like, nope, left. Never went back to that cave again. I was
ready to
gone.
attack.
That was gone immediately. I didn't even look back at my friends. I left. Like, it's just gone.
Good
Nope.
luck, guys. Every man for himself.
I see a Bushmaster, I'm leaving. It's not.
It's hilarious.
Oh yeah, I'm gone. That's. Yeah, I was gone. I looked back, and my friends hadn't even left the cave yet, and they just looked at me like, "You left?" I'm like, "Yeah, I left." You kidding
Of course.
Self-preservation. I was so close to that thing.
Okay.
That's my Bushmaster story.
That's a very cool story.
Yeah.
What about any caimans? I know the speckled caiman, I believe, lives down there as well.
So caimans aren't super uncommon. Something like the black caiman is a bit harder to find. Those are the big ones, right?
Okay.
For them, you really have to go looking for them. You have to go out and like where there's nobody. It's usually like you're setting out for a weekend. You're going out into a boat. You're going in the middle of nowhere. You're going to try and find one of these, and even then, there's no guarantee. Something like the speckled caiman, they get like 4 or 5 feet long.
Right.
They're like squirrels down there.
Oh yeah.
Everywhere. They're all over the place, and they're terrified of people.
Okay. Because they're so small.
Yeah. Well, 4 feet. When it comes to crocodilians,
small,
when it comes to crocodilians, it's pretty small. And yeah, no, I've handled a fair few.
Okay.
Handled a fair few of them. They're, for the most part, you walk towards them, they're gone.
Yeah, they just jump in the water, like.
They are all over the place. If you're fishing, they'll come for your fish, and sometimes you'll get like during breeding season, kind of like moose up here during rutting season. You just don't go near them at all. Okay. Again, down there during breeding season, you go to those big males who are challenging themselves. They get super aggressive.
Do you ever see like two males fighting each other?
I never saw them fighting, but you could hear like what's it called? Like that gargle they do when they're like a U shape under the water. You see videos of American alligators doing it, and they're like belching underwater. You could hear it.
It's called like bellowing or
something like that. Yeah, you can hear it. You can hear it if you're near the river and it's completely quiet. You can hear it, which is super cool. It means don't go there, but you can hear it. Yeah, just don't go
in the other direction.
Yeah, you don't. Even if it's not huge, that's a 4-foot lizard with sharp teeth. Like, you know, 100%. If it's angry, I'm not. Yeah.
No, 100%.
Yeah, but really cool place to grow up being into reptiles, for sure.
Yeah, I bet a lot of.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to take a trip down there one day. Like,
yeah,
high up on the bucket list there. And
so I was planning on going back December of last year, but with COVID and everything, you just couldn't.
Right.
Yeah, but such a cool country, especially again reptile wise.
Yeah, and
Uh,
amphibian wise too, man.
oh, all over the
Oh,
place.
just
They're
even
everywhere.
even even mammals, like just animal wise in general, like
Yeah.
yeah.
People don't think you can find salamanders down there. Dart frogs, depending where you are, you can go find them. Don't touch them. Obviously, that goes without saying.
You can touch them, just
Only
wash your
once.
hands. Don't no only once.
Only
No,
once.
just don't eat them and wash your hands. Like
Yeah,
I
I had the misfortune of touching it once. I didn't know it was there. I put my hand down on a branch and I grazed it a little bit. Not fun
yeah.
feeling.
No, I bet yeah.
To this day, I
I
don't know what species it was. It was brown and I saw it jumping away. I have no idea what species it is. Not a clue.
okay. Well,
But
you're alive now, so
clearly, yeah, I'm
you're
fine.
okay.
It's
You're okay.
it clearly wasn't like one of the high potent ones, but it
Yeah.
was still wasn't a ton of fun. But even then, like if you want to get to that peak of herping, go find an anaconda. Like
Right. Yeah. Did you
bring
ever find
somebody.
one?
Do not go by yourself. I
Did you
did.
ever?
I had when it comes to the wild, this is when I was a little older down, like when I was 13, 14, a little bit bigger. Um, I had caught a couple small ones, like some babies. And even babies, like they're bigger than adult
An
bipod. Like,
average, yeah, 100%.
yeah, like so yeah, I had catch babies. When it comes to the adults, I had seen them be caught. I never caught it myself. I have a photo somewhere again of my friend's dad. There was a herpetologist. He brought us out to go find like a female, like a big female. He ended up catching it with a couple of guys that he had because it's not a one man process.
Of course not.
And then like I got to hold part of the body of the big ones, but I never even attempted. Like I wouldn't even try. Even to this day, I don't know if I'd even try catching an
No, of
adult
course
without
not.
somebody there with me. Like,
You need a good team with you.
yeah, that's a big animal. That's
No,
super
100%.
strong. Yeah,
That's
I
absolutely awesome.
I always tried finding a yellow. I never could. Because there's three species of anaconda: the green, the black, and the yellow. And I always
Right.
tried finding the yellow. They're much smaller, but they're harder to find. But they're gorgeous. I always tried. I never found one. But maybe one day.
Maybe one day. That's
We'll
very
see.
cool, man.
Maybe when I go back, I'll give it a try.
Very, very cool.
Hmm.
I would absolutely love to go down there, go herping down there. Even just yeah, absolutely.
It's something else. Super
For
cool.
sure. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna wrap up the episode here then. Thank you very much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. It's
Can you
fun.
let everybody know where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, Instagram at Birdseyeherping. See it right there.
Yes, I'll drop. Oh,
So
we're right there, and I'll put
yeah,
the links to it in my
yeah,
in
it's
the
right
show
it's right
notes.
underneath my face. That's the best. Yeah, that's where you can find me. So if you're watching this, have any problems with what I said, shoot me a message. Like, more than happy to talk. But yeah, that's where you can find me if you ever want to.
Awesome. Thank you very
Yeah,
much once again for coming on, man.
thanks a lot.
We'll talk soon.
Absolutely.
For sure. All right, that was episode 6 of Daffy's Roundtable. Thank you all for listening. That was Derek from Birdseyeherping. I'll put all of his information in the show notes. I'll also put all the pictures that we discussed of all the leopard gecko morphs in the show notes, as well as all my information. I am Daffy's Reptiles on Instagram and YouTube. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.